Hey everyone, welcome back to Along the Way. My name is David.
I'm TJ.
And we are pastors here at the Grove in Moncks Corner, and this is a weekly podcast that we do called Along the Way, where we try to spend some time talking about our journeys with Christ and digging into the scriptures. We're trying to pair up some themes each week that go along with the worship services and the sermons that we're doing. As kind of a source material, we're using a book called Core 52 by Mark Moore, and as sort of a guidebook. And we've just been enjoying this process of just spending time together. It's been a rough week for TJ. He's been a little under the weather.
Yeah, I've been fighting a stomach bug, but I think today's the first day that I felt semi-normal in like 7 days.
If he says something that seems a little weird to you, he has been heavily medicated this week.
That's right.
Cut him a little slack. So, but our theme this week, which should be one I think we both have a heart for, but obviously part of what your career does is you're a worship leader. Mm-hmm. Our theme this week is worship. And so as we're kind of throwing some ideas around, some questions, we've both had the privilege to be part of some meaningful worship services through our past and through years of ministry. And not all of them, I would guess, are probably ones that you would say, man, had the biggest band or even most people in attendance.
Right.
There are probably other factors that led to it being meaningful. So if you think back to some of the more meaningful ones you've had, what's one that stands out?
Yeah, so a few months ago, one of my close friends from Atlanta passed away with cancer. And going to his memorial service, his funeral, I knew there was going to be worship, but I didn't realize that it was like that was the highlight of the thing. And so the band was made up of people throughout his life that were musicians. So it was kind of like a band that a bunch of different people came together to form the band that day and play the music. And one thing that everyone said about my friend Britt was just how faithful he was. Yeah. Like no matter how tough times got, like he was always strong in his faith. And so that's the kind of the theme going into it. And so standing next to some friends that I haven't seen in a long time, there to honor my friend Britt, trying to sing through a song like Firm Foundation, you know, when rain came, wind blew, but my house was built on you, bro. I was like a blubbering mess, but I just remember thinking like, this is how funerals should be. Like this is. I hope mine is like this, and that it's worshipful. So I mean, I've had the opportunity to be in a lot of really cool worship services, but that one by far like stands out for me.
Yeah, I didn't know Britt, but we had some like common points of contact, people that we both knew of, and so I know some of the folks that were at that service, and just heard some of that same feedback. And I think when you're somebody that truly has a heart for the Lord, and you're walking with Him daily. I've heard this expression used before about people that people looked up to as like spiritual leaders, that you almost wonder if they even knew the moment like their life ended here and life began in heaven, because it was still part of that relationship, that ongoing experience. And so I'm like, whenever that moment comes, I want that to be a worshipful experience, a time of celebration. I appreciate you sharing that, because I think, as we said before, we were talking about this. That's probably not. Most people probably wouldn't think of a funeral being a meaningful worship experience.
Right.
I had a couple that came to mind, and trying to rank them is impossible, but just they stood out for different reasons. One was at a high school CIY conference back when I was a youth pastor, and actually at the time I was serving as a youth pastor in a part-time role, but I was teaching school in a full-time capacity. And we used to take our kids at our church back in Georgia to Milligan College in Johnson City, Tennessee. And the chapel there, because that was the location we went to every year, it just became like a very, very special place. Yeah. And I remember singing this particular song in a worship service, and the song was actually called Whatever. And the lyrics of the chorus would go, whatever you want me to do, whatever you want me to say, wherever you want me to go, I want to be faithful for you. And this, as I was singing the lyrics out loud to myself, I was hearing myself say this before God, and being reminded of the origin or the inspiration for that song, which was when Isaiah has this vision of God in His temple, and he says like, I'm a ruined man because I'm a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean hands, and the angel takes the coal and touches his lips with it, and says that you've been cleansed now, and then they ask like, who will I send to my people? And Isaiah raises his hand and says, here I am, send me. And so like all that was going through my mind as I was like, Lord, this is what you've led me here for. This is what you've wired me for. And so that was the moment when I had tried to run from ministry early on in my college career because of some bad experiences, but that was the moment where I felt God was bringing me back to where He needed me to be.
Man, that's cool. So I went to CIY 1 year as a quote camper, and we went to Milligan. And so before I was thinking through like telling the story of my friend's funeral, I was literally thinking about 2006 Milligan, and their chapel was just so beautiful.
It is, yeah.
And then like singing songs like The Stand for the first time, and seeing like how powerful Christian music can be. Yeah. And so I have a very fond memories of that same room.
The other one, I think I might have told this story recently in the sermon. The other one I thought about was on a missions trip when I was still in college. We were in Jamaica, and I had just learned how to play guitar. And I knew 3 songs, and I really took my guitar with me just to kind of practice. But when you're in a ministry experience, particularly a mission experience, and you show up with a guitar, somebody says, "Oh, well, I guess you're going to be our worship leader now." And so I did those 3 songs over and over and over and over again on that missions trip, and it was just it kind of was a moment where God stretched me into areas where I was not comfortable. And it ended up being a real blessing. So, other question I'm just intrigued to think about is, I think I kind of know your preferred style of music. Yeah. So, if you were going to design like TJ's favorite worship service, like what would the instrumentation look like? What would the vibe be? Is there a particular location you might have in mind? What would be your best worship service? Yeah,
I think my best worship service, like I'm not saying this just to gas up my team, but it's like my worship team, man. They're so good, and they're like every week they're in it, no matter what's going on or what's like out there distracting us. Like I feel like we always have we do a really good job of like bringing it back and making it about Jesus. So I would put them against any. It's not a competition, but I would put them up against any worship team, right? I will say we got to lead worship one night at camp for middle schoolers, and it was absolutely wild because like singing every word to every song, jumping and dancing and hooting and hollering to everything, and it was just. I was like, this is it, man. This is like heaven right now. And they might not know all the songs, but they're trying their best, And so that stands out to me as a worship leader as like one of my favorite memories.
Yeah, camp worship is a different animal. It's a different vibe of worship for sure. I guess I better see our worship team now too. No,
that's right. I'm just kidding.
I think when I think of instrumentation, I'm just somebody. I guess my preferred style. I love all kinds of music, but if I was going to pick out a style, it would probably be like a more acoustic set with like a violin.
Oh yeah.
Maybe a cello worked in there a little bit, almost having like a little Appalachian or Celtic kind of feel to it. There's just something so like just melodic about that kind of draws me in. So
I love that too. So like if you play like a violin or a cello or a banjo, like hit me up.
We need you. Yeah, that's right. All right, well, let's jump into the chapter. Obviously, the theme is about worship, and everything we've described so far has been kind of centered upon a worship service. The music, the singing, the lyrics, all those sort of things. And those are critical parts of what worship can be, but worship is certainly not limited to a song service.
Right.
And I think that's a really, really important theme and truth that we're going to dive into today. So the question that Mark poses at the beginning of the chapter is, what does it really look like to worship God? And the scripture that he kind of anchors this discussion in comes out of Jesus' encounter with the Samaritan woman at the well. Do you want to share that verse?
Yeah, so the verse is after the conversation with the woman. I'm sure we'll retell the story, but he says that God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in both spirit and truth.
Yeah, and I love this narrative. If I were to go back through like all the sermons I've preached out the years, this one probably ranks pretty close to the top of the number of times that I've spoken on this text of Jesus and the Samaritan woman at the well. It's such a beautiful story. I think it's fascinating that of all the encounters that Jesus had with individuals, that this is the longest recorded conversation in the Gospels. I think that's pretty neat. I love the way that the Chosen series
1000%
portrayed this particular scene. When Jonathan Rumi, the actor that plays Jesus, looks at her, as the story's kind of coming to its climax, and he says, "I came here today just to meet you." Yeah. Like this is a divine appointment, and I love that. So there's so many different ways we could go with this story, but we're specifically focused on the theme of worship today. But I do think it's important to understand the context of the story so we can get into what Jesus says to her. The whole encounter is about Jesus trying to get closer to this woman and her putting up walls and barriers. At first, when he tries to reach out in a way to try to make a connection, she reacts much like an abused animal would. Like even if you're trying to reach out to help it, it's going to growl and snarl at you. And as we learn about her story, we learn that she's been through a lot of pain and broken relationships and broken faith. And so when another man comes along, asking for a drink of water, I'm sure all those wounds are just like reopened again for her. And so at first she's like, listen, we're from different ethnicities. Why are you even talking to me? And then it was, well, you Jews worship here, us Samaritans worship here. I mean, anything and everything she could do to keep him at a distance, she was trying to do. And I think about that part of this, this conversation is I think that's what happens to many people when it comes to worship, and why maybe worshiping with a full heart, full voice, full mind is difficult, because that sort of connection requires vulnerability. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, I remember when I first started going to church, Spring Road Christian Church, your best friend was actually the worship pastor there when I was there. And I think he would echo this, like the culture of worship there wasn't very hand-raisy or like emotional. And then I go to...
Hand-raisy, I like that.
They would clap sometimes, but go to CIY and I'm experiencing all this stuff for the first time. And I remember raising my hands at CIY and like, because you're in that room where, everyone else is here, I feel like I can be myself. But then I go back to Spring Road, and it's like, we were meeting in the gym at the time, and it's like very bright in there, and like everybody's kind of looking around, and it's like I had to get over that idea of what everyone's going to think before I felt like I could fully express myself in worship. I haven't always been this expressive TJ in worship, because, I mean, it took a lot for me to recognize that it was okay to be vulnerable in those times.
Yeah, I think my story is not dissimilar to that. I grew up in a pretty traditional Restoration Movement church, and I can remember the first time, well, at least in my memory, the first time I remember seeing a family in our church that raised their hands, and that was so unusual and foreign to me. And I can even remember hearing comments from people like, are they charismatic? What's up with them? Or did they realize are they in the right kind of church? And it was just unusual, because I had never seen that modeled for me before.
Right.
And I would say really, not even growing up at like church camp did we have that same kind of energy. Like we would sing a lot of fun, goofy songs that had motions and dances with them in camp, but not the sincere, just like eyes closed, hands raised in the air, somebody being on your knees, just fully engaged and invested in that moment. It probably wasn't until I was a student at ACC, Atlanta Christian College, and then had ministry opportunities myself. And then really, I would say being at CIYs, leading students to CIY, or being on missions trips myself, and just a lot of other stuff stripped away, that I realized, this is a moment between me and the Lord.
Right.
No matter how anybody else around me responds or engages, it's inconsequential. This is about this moment between me and the Lord. And so I appreciate that. And we never want anything, even here, for expression to feel forced. Like you might sing songs where the lyrics talk about lifting your hands or raising your hands. It feels kind of weird to me to sing that when you're not doing it, but I mean, we want that to be a natural expression. But here's where I kind of push back with people who say that's not comfortable for them. I can see somebody that might feel uncomfortable clapping or raising their hands in worship in a church context. But then I can see them in a different context. Let's say at a ball game where they're watching their kids play, or they're watching their favorite team play.
Right.
And they can be quite expressive.
Oh, for sure.
They're clapping, they're hooting and hollering, they got hands raised, they're jumping up and down. And even just being in a game, sometimes you can be sitting by complete strangers, but because you root for the same team, when your team scores a touchdown or somebody hits a home run, you're hugging this person you've never met before, because like you feel like we've connected, we're community now.
Right.
If that can happen at a ball game, why shouldn't that be happening at an even greater, deeper level in the context of your faith community where you worship? So that's not to guilt or shame anybody, but it is, if that's something that you struggled with, and this is the people both here in our church, but also might be watching this elsewhere, that's just what I would challenge you to think about. Is like, you're passionate about something.
Oh yeah.
You care about something, and maybe you don't. Maybe you're not as showy with that passion, but I bet you are in some ways. Well, there's no one more worthy and more deserving of our full heart and passion other than God.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what we, as a worship team, we pray some of the same things every week. And one of those things is that we're worshipers first and we're leaders second. And so that really puts us in the mindset of what we're about to go do together is really give God everything that we've got. And in that, hopefully we're able to lead the bride closer to Him. And I'll say this, like, at our church, there are people in every section of our church now that are in it 100% every single week. And it's really encouraging to us sometimes. Like we don't do it for the applause or for the hand raising, but I will say that it does make a difference on our energy when it's like, man, we see the Spirit moving through what we're doing to help them connect. And so if you're on the border or on the line, and you feel like this, like, hey, I want to be more expressive in worship, but I don't know what people might think of me, just know that you're not going to be alone, at least here. Yeah. Like there's someone else here that's already expressive. And
I think those moments of applause in between songs, whether that's in our worship service here or at other places, to me, there's a couple of different. There's a couple of ways that I mean that when I do it. Mm-hmm. And I've had the privilege of being a part of worship teams and being on stage and helping to lead that too. And a lot of times if I'm part of a team like that and the song is over and people in the congregation are clapping, I'm clapping too. Because I want them to say, yes, we're like a choir together doing this. Or maybe I'm the choir director if I'm on stage and you're the choir, but we're offering up our song together. And then if I'm in the congregation and like if I'm clapping after a song is over, I'm appreciating the servants who are on stage leading us, but really it's like an act of, man, that was what we just all did together and gave to God. That was a really cool thing. That was a special gift that we gave him. As we jump back into the narrative for a second, though, I think too about some of the excuses or the boundaries that the woman was putting up when she was going back and forth with Jesus. She said, well, you Jews say we need to worship in Jerusalem, and we Samaritans worship on Mount Gerizim. And I feel like this is an early example of worship wars, which have existed in churches for years and years and years. And sometimes people think that was a relatively new thing, like the last 50 years, like when contemporary music first started becoming a thing. But it's the pushback on certain forms and styles of worship has been around for generations, for centuries. The first time a piano was brought into church, it was a bit of an issue because pianos were in saloons, or the first time that a guitar or a drum, because that was associated with rock music, and so there's always been pushback. The other thing that I think is important is that typically when somebody comes to faith in Christ, or they come into a church for the first time, and they've moved into an area, or they're kind of rediscovering their faith. Most of us I was asking the question, like, what's your preferred style of music or whatever, preferred environment? Most of us prefer the church as it was the moment we came. That's what drew us into it. Right. And so when the church begins to change a little bit, when the worship begins to change a little bit, that's where we get stretched, which I think is a good thing. There's, I think it's 9 or 10 different times in the Bible the phrase "sing to the Lord a new song" is present. Yeah. And I think not that there's not value in the older songs as well, because there is, but the idea that worship should never feel ordinary. And if I'm kind of getting into a routine, or if I'm getting complacent with it, then then there's a problem there. So the idea that Jesus is trying to help this woman, and we know that from the rest of the story that this was just kind of one more kind of straw man argument she was trying to put up to keep Jesus at a distance. But unfortunately, some of those conflicts about worship and style and music or whatever have done a lot of damage to the church. And so I'm grateful that that's not really been an issue in our church for a long, long time. And I'm grateful that people, no matter what song we do, they recognize that we just want to do it well. Mm-hmm. We recognize there's value of songs from all generations, like people that loved Jesus 100 years ago wrote great music. People that love Jesus today are writing great music about him. And so if it communicates a solid truth and it engages our people, we just want to do it well.
I'd say we have like there's 3 primary people that are like in the worship leader role each week. It's usually me, but in my absence or on some weeks it'll be Cody or Matthew. And I think we all 3 have different styles in how we put sets together. And we were talking about that a little bit this week. But I've never felt like the church wasn't engaged with whoever was leading worship, even though our styles or our sets are different. I wrote in my notes, you see this all the time on social media when people are looking for a church. They either want a church that does contemporary or does traditional. And one thing that I admire about you is saying, like, as our church grows and continues to like expand, like, we'll never do the contemporary service versus traditional service because I don't think that's worshipful at all. It's kind of like the conversation of, well, I want a church that only does expository preaching, no topical preaching. It's like, why not both? Yeah. Like, why can't we have both? And so this Sunday, I'm actually gonna say. Like we're doing some songs specifically because our students are back, they're fired up from CIY. But we're also doing Leaning on the Everlasting Arms, which is a song that's going to mean a lot to a lot of people for longer than these students have been alive. We're also going to do the chorus of The Stand, which was monumental for me back in 2006. And so we do have good generational worship here at the Grove. And I would just encourage any church out there that's listening that when you put your set together, don't look at the copyright date of when the song was written. Just what does your church need to hear and sing through together?
Yeah. The verse that you read at the beginning and where this conversation is leading us back to is what's really at the heart of worship. And in this encounter that Jesus had with this woman, that's where he's trying to get to with her. There's a moment in that conversation early on where when he first asked for the water, and she says, well, you've got nothing to draw with, and this well is deep. And whether that was an intentional statement by her part or kind of a subconscious thing, I really feel like in a way she was kind of, that well was like a metaphor for her own soul. Like you've got, you're just another man coming along making big promises, and you've got nothing to draw with, and this well is deep. Like there's some wounds that go down, and you can't touch this, you can't affect this.
Yeah.
And Jesus was just exceedingly patient and loving and kind and compassionate, and kept drawing a little bit closer and a little bit closer and a little bit closer, and eventually all the walls came tumbling down. And part of that was what Jesus had to say to her about true worship, and part of it was the encounter of, the one who stands before you, I am He. Because her final go-to was, well, when Messiah comes, He'll explain everything.
Yeah.
And Jesus says, well, what do you know? Here I am. And ultimately, that's what worship should be. It should be that personal encounter with our risen Lord and Savior. And when she recognized that the Messiah was standing in front of her, everything about her experience changed. The very people that she was unwilling to show her face in front of to get water at the same time as the rest of the women in town, she's running back into the village and saying, come meet a man who told me everything I ever did. And what's, I think, ironic is they already knew everything she ever did too, and that's why she was out there alone.
Right.
But she didn't care anymore.
That's so good.
She's allowed the walls to come down. She's vulnerable. She just wants to be with Jesus, and she wants as many people to be with her to be with Jesus. And I think that's what the heart of worship's all about. Let's get into this whole thing about spirit and truth. What are some things you gleaned from the chapter when Jesus talks about that? What does he mean?
Well, you're a word nerd, and so when
I gladly wear that title.
So when I was reading through this chapter, I was really leaning into the Greek words that he was using because. When I was in college, I wasn't studying to be a worship leader. And so, I don't have, the worship leadership training from, the classroom, so to speak. And so, the first word that the word that John used for worship here means literally to kiss forward as if, like a king. For me, I was just thinking about this idea of Jesus being the king. He is the ultimate authority, right? He spoke and everything came into being. It's just this mindset of when I sing songs or when I pray, who I'm in the presence of. And so I think there's something here I want to share with my team this week about. I want to do a little bit more study on it, but that was pretty eye-opening for me. Just the word worship meaning to kiss, as if I'm kissing the ring, as if I'm bowing down and submitting to His authority.
I can't remember the first time I came across that word. It probably was back in Bible college. But I've always been intrigued by, being the word nerd that I am, just the origins, the etymology of that word, the idea to kiss towards, to the point where years ago, and I still do this now, when our typical flow of our worship service, if you're not part of the Grove, is the worship team does their set, and the last part of that song, or the last song leading into the sermon, we'll send the kids out to kids' church, and they usually kind of take one more chorus. And then somebody on the team will pray, and as I'm coming up on stage to kind of get my table in place and all that kind of stuff. So, but the last moment before I leave, where I typically sit, which is over there, and before I walk up on the stage, I will take my hand and I will blow a kiss towards heaven. And I've been doing that for I don't know how long. That's now, cool. Because I love the sense of when you go in to kiss Amber, when I go in to kiss Erica. It's the idea that I'm not looking at anybody else. In fact, if I'm probably not looking at all, my eyes are probably
close my
closed
eyes,
as I go in for the kiss. It's probably kind of creepy to keep my eyes open anyway. But my full attention is on her. I mean, I'm not thinking about anyone else. I mean, and my eyes are closed, and there's probably no more vulnerable moment than when you are literally face to face with somebody, and in that shared space that would be uncomfortable if it was. Hopefully, anybody else was in that space, it would be uncomfortable for either one of us. And the idea that I'm giving that sort of adoration and attention, affection to Jesus in that moment is what I like to think of when I think about that word, to kiss toward. So, yeah, I love that word and I love that expression. And again, it's just it's a sign of vulnerability. There's the idea of spirit and truth. Spirit connects into the heart of it, where it's an inside-out movement. And although we might have forms of expression that we do on the outside, for that to be sincere and authentic, it's an outflow or an overflow of where our heart is.
Yeah, absolutely. We talk about that a lot. It's weird to say it out loud, right? That every time you come into worship or a worship service, your mood or your attention isn't always going to be the same, right? Your life circumstances are directly going to affect how you're responding in worship. And so I highlighted this line from Mark. He said, 2 people standing side by side in church may both pray, sing, weep, and shout, yet have very different experiences with God in their spirits. And I wrote next to it, filling versus outpouring. You can come into worship and have a response, and maybe, and I said this in a sermon a couple weeks ago about how Sunday could be the overflow of what your week looked like, because worship is something you do in every arena of your life, which we'll cover in the chapter. But at the same time, the next Sunday, you might have got, chewed up and spit out at work all week. Maybe the next week that you're coming into the presence of the Lord, you need to be filled, and it's not an overflow. And you're still going to have those same responses, weeping, praying, singing, all these things, because it all points back to that same truth, which is Jesus.
That's beautiful.
Was that good?
So you mentioned there are several Greek words that Mark throws into the chapter, words that are used throughout the New Testament in particular to talk about the aspect or the experience of what worship is. The word you already mentioned, which means to kiss toward, is proskuneo. Another word he mentions was eulogeo, which is where we get the word eulogy from. And it's the act of verbal praise. It's where you think about you're performing a eulogy for someone at their funeral. You're getting up there and hopefully saying kind, but also true things about them and the life they lived and the legacy they left. But the idea of this verbal praise, creation by its very existence, the mountains, the trees, the valleys, the ocean, by its very existence, it points to the Creator. They're an active praise all the time, but we as human beings are unique of all creation because we can respond to God in relational worship and also through language, through the ability to communicate. And so the words we say, the words we sing, the words we pray absolutely matter. And so this idea of the Spirit and truth, the truth part of it is that we are conveying, that we're embracing and receiving, but also conveying truths about who God is. And so I'm sure there are worship songs throughout the years that people probably put on your, on your radar, and you've probably listened to them and are like, yeah, we're not doing that, man, because it's just either the lyrics of them are kind of cheesy, or maybe sometimes just not even theologically accurate.
Right.
So.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's a fine line that I feel like we have to walk a lot recently. There's a big thing about people saying that contemporary worship music is too me-focused. And yeah, a lot of songs are, but when you think about
the Book of Psalms.
Yeah. Or when you think about worship in general, like we do 5 songs every Sunday. Not every song is all me focused. So hopefully there's a good mix. But I remember, look, if you don't like Reckless Love because you're not understanding the deeper thing that Corey was trying to say when you wrote that song, that's okay. You don't have to play it. But I remember there's a song called "Resurrecting" by Elevation where the line in the song is, "Our God has robbed the grave." And someone was like, we can't do that song. We can't do that song because God wouldn't rob any. And we're like, no, it's an artistic way of saying that he rose from the dead, So yeah, I think that discussion definitely goes both ways. Yeah. But we are careful about the songs that we choose because we want to make sure that they are theologically appropriate.
Yeah, and I mentioned the Psalms a second ago when you were talking because I'm deeply steeped in the Psalms right now as we're working on this worship service. This worship series we're going through, and the whole year we've been talking about the right way to approach different parts of the Bible. And the Psalms are lyric poetry. Mm-hmm. You don't read poetry in the same way that you would read a narrative,
right,
or a genealogy. Or even the Gospels from that standpoint. Yeah. You read it differently. The language is different. If you've ever written a poem before or written a song before, much of the language you use is figurative. It's not meant to be taken literal. It's meant to symbolize or represent something that you're really feeling or really thinking, such as robbing a grave. The idea, like that same as kind of death is arrested, and so it's that Jesus has stepped in and defeated and overcome death, and so. It's important to be mindful about what we say, what we communicate, and even more so when we're in the midst of a worship service. And I think that's where singing a new song, learning a new song, can be a real blessing, because there's some songs that we could literally sing with our eyes closed because we have sang them so many times. And just like we talk about in communion every week, we take communion every Sunday here at the Grove. And we will always do so because it's an important part, maybe the most critical part of what we do to remember who Jesus is and what He's done for us. However, anything you do with that kind of regularity can become ordinary and routine.
Right.
And so if you're only singing the songs that you've always known and never kind of stretching yourself with new forms of music, new lyrics, it would be very easy to kind of fall into that mindset. And so when you're learning a new song, in fact, sometimes you'll even say this from the stage, like, hey, if you're only jumping into this first song, man, just pay attention to the lyrics. Think about what we're saying. But I think that should be true of everything we convey. And I'll be just again, transparent here. There have been times where I've come into worship experiences and my heart has been heavy. And maybe I was struggling to trust God. Mm-hmm. And so if the song I Trust in God is on the worship set and I'm struggling to trust in Him, I might have a hard time saying those words out loud. And the last thing that I want to be is insincere before God, because He knows it anyway. Mm-hmm. And so being mindful, being aware, to me, it's the spirit is the heart part of it, the inside out, but the truth is that verbal praise. And what am I saying about God? And am I just giving a lip service, or do I genuinely believe it to be true?
Yeah, and that's so hard when you do songs that you've done so many times. I think we as a worship leader, we have comfort songs that we feel like we can fall back into, or if we have a week where we don't have enough time to rehearse, like, all right, let's throw Great Are You, Lord in there. But I'll tell you, every time we've done that song is hit different every time, whether it's Justin doing something different on the drums or a different vocalist, or the church just sings that song so loud and powerful. Like it's like you said, you can find new ways or new things out of old songs, even though they feel like they're dated.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's good.
A couple of the words that he mentions in the chapter I think are significant. The word doxazo, which means to glorify. Like we're not giving God glory that He didn't already have. We're recognizing how glorious He already is. And I think that's the language you see oftentimes in the book of Psalms in particular, which a lot of our both old and newer worship songs come to us from the book of Psalms, is this. It's like our eyes have been opened. I'm like, oh God, you're amazing. You've always been amazing, but like I see it now in a way I've never seen it before. And I think that experience of individual and corporate worship is part of that experience. And then I think it's also a good thing to talk about. The idea of spirit and truth is the way that we already touched on a little bit as far as like posture and position and physical expression. But I think it's important to kind of recognize what that can do for you. If you're in a worship experience and you're doing something with not on stage, but if you're out in the congregation worshiping, what is probably like your natural physical expression? What do you typically do?
I'm typically like a hands together, and then I feel like if it's a song that I know I'm comfortable with, I'll close my eyes and I'll raise one. I'm a one-hand guy.
Yeah, I'm probably more of I think I'm becoming more of a two-hand guy.
Yeah.
To me, like this, arms wide open, for me, feels like I'm responding to God's arms being wide open. Like it's open, it's fullness. It's like, God, I just want to receive you as I know you've already received me. Most time when I have one hand up, I've got the other hand on my heart here, almost like it's my own pledge of allegiance to the Lord. Sometimes the hands are more like close by, like I'm receiving something. And I try to allow that to be a natural, again, outflow, overflow of where the lyrics are taking me or where whatever God is saying to me in that moment. When we have musical interludes, in those moments, I'll start praying. And I'll start praying out loud, not where the whole room can hear me typically, but maybe Eric and some other folks who are sitting close to me can. But I'll just kind of be like whatever that thought or that message is of the song, I'll start praying that specifically for myself, for my family, for others. Oftentimes, because we try to be intentional about it, the lyrics of the song connect with the message of the day, and so I'm thinking, Lord, when I get to that point today, I just pray that you would make people's hearts receptive to that truth. So just trying to stay engaged as much as possible. Have you ever had an experience of worship where you went to your knees or even fell flat on the ground?
Yeah, I think a CIY was the first time I ever actually knelt in worship, and I can't really tell you why I don't do that more often. I won't call them out because we didn't ask permission before we record this podcast, but there's one lady in our church recently who from the stage went to her knees in worship, and she asked me afterwards if that was okay, and I was like, absolutely.
Yeah,
if the Lord was leading you and moving you in that moment, that is not only an appropriate physical response, but also a biblical response to how we see people encountering the presence of the Lord.
Yeah, we don't have kneeling pads here connected to our pews in our church, and typically the churches that do, it's because there are specific programmed times within the service that you're expected to kneel.
Right.
And again, I'm not judging that or saying anything's wrong with that, but I feel like it's more of when those moments when you feel led to do that or just overwhelmed or compelled to do that, it really should be like a natural response and reaction, and with little to no concern of to do something intentionally that distracts others or intentionally draws attention to yourself. Then that's not healthy in worship, because all the attention, all the focus should be upon God and God alone. But when it's an authentic response, in particular, to me, the sign of kneeling is submission, it's surrender, and not even just surrendering to God's will and God's ways, but maybe it's because you've been burdened all week with something. You're just worn slap out, and you just need to say, God, I need to just throw this off at your feet. So I think bodily posture is important. Prayer is a part of worship, and we already touched on music and singing. One of the things he kind of steered the conversation towards, the latter part of the chapter, he starts talking about the connection between worship and service. And I like the idea that when we talk about what happens on a Sunday morning here, we actually call it a worship service. And we try to encourage people to both worship and serve. Find your ways that you can connect here. But when you read through that part of it, what did that touch on for you? What did that make you think of?
From the very beginning of reading the chapter, I knew that if he didn't bring this up, I wanted to make sure that we brought up Romans 12, where Paul says, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. And some translations say your true worship. And that's kind of what I was talked about earlier in the last sermon I preached, is just how this permeates every arena of your life. For some people, you are worshiping God by serving in our children's ministry. You are worshiping God by how you handle your finances. You are worshiping God by how you treat people in the line at the grocery store. And it's not just what you do on a Sunday morning or the songs you listen to in your car, but it is every aspect of your life and how you respond to that.
That was the lyrics of an old Stephen Curtis Chapman song. I date myself with that a little bit, but he had a song called "This Is a Moment Made for Worshiping," and in the lyrics of the song, he kind of goes through all those seemingly insignificant moments of a typical week for any of us, getting stuck in traffic, doing laundry, and he's like, those moments are no different or more unique than a Sunday morning.
Right.
At least they shouldn't be. And or they still have the potential, for a moment for you to engage with the Lord. Now, you may not be surrounded in each of those moments by your larger faith community, but you're still in the presence of God. And the way that you do your job, the way that you parent your children, the way that you play on the softball team, I mean, all of it is an opportunity to acknowledge and honor God, and hopefully allow other people to see or glean something about God, through you and how you worship Him. I wish I could remember. I've been using this line for a long, long time, and I did not come up with it. And I wish I could remember where I first heard it. But the person who said it, he was talking about the phenomenon of people that would raise their hands in worship, and he loved that, and he kind of grew up like we did. That wasn't normal for him growing up, but he just grown to really appreciate that expressive form of worship. But he said, his challenge to us, and when he was speaking, and to the church as a whole, is as passionate as we are about lifting our hands, to be equally as passionate about dirtying our hands in service.
That's good.
And he said, hands that are dirty in the service of the Lord are just as holy as hands that are lifted high in a worship service.
That's good.
And I was like, that definitely preach. And it's something I've used consistently throughout ministry, because it's all a part of honoring God as that living sacrifice you talked about. The question that he asked is like, why our prayers rarely reach the heart of worship. And he talked about how they typically most of our prayer lives tend to be about thanking God or sharing our needs with Him. God, I'm thankful for all that you've done for me. Or God, please take care of these people in my life, or these things in my life. And he said those aren't unimportant, but they tend to leave out a focus upon God. And so I'm putting together a prayer guide right now that we're going to be making available to people in a couple of weeks here at the church. And in that prayer guide, I talk about that pray model, P-R-A-Y, which we see Jesus model for us in the Lord's Prayer. And there's kind of 4 elements there. There's a time of praise and thanksgiving. There's repentance. There's asking, making needs known, and then there's yielding. So that's where we get P-R-A-Y from. And I think what Jesus' reason He gave us that model prayer is because it's balanced. I don't want to try to hide the fact that I have needs, because God knows it. I don't want to certainly hide the fact that I got sin, because God definitely knows that. I want to be grateful, but starting my prayer off by simply focusing upon Him. And so the worship lyrics, obviously you want music to focus upon God, but what I appreciate about the music of the last 30 plus years is that in many ways it's a lot more personal than songs from the past. Songs in the past oftentimes talked about God, like that God up there is somebody we really need to think about and worship, as opposed to that second person of not just He but you. And I in any song that brings a stronger personal connection between me and God, I think it's got value. So
yeah, I think about songs that the whole argument of CCM being too, quote, me focused. I think you just so delicately crushed that argument by saying, well, yeah, because I am connecting to God through these songs. There's a song called "At the Altar" by it's either Elevation Worship. I think it's worship, not rhythm. Where she says it's called "At the Altar," and the tag is like, "There's no waste at the altar." Like, I'm bringing everything I've got. Mm-hmm. But the line that caught fire on social media is, "I'm coming." Or I'm running, stumbling, I know, but I'm coming, making her way to the altar, like all these roadblocks in her life. And yes, this song is so very personal to her, but how many people can just relate to that? Yeah. I'm on my way, Lord. I'm doing everything I can to get there. You just gotta be patient. And I think about moments like that, and the way lyrics and songs are written now, and how personal they are, but how it might sound like the young lady that wrote that portion of the song, how it's uniquely her story, but really it's not. There's someone out there that can relate to that.
I think there's tons of people that can relate to that. And the idea that what we don't always see underneath when people show up for a worship service on any given Sunday at any given church is we might see them walking in, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually, they're crawling in. They're carrying shrapnel and they've been catching strays all week, and they're bleeding, and they're and they're just doing the best they can just to be here and be present. And so, I love that. It's really good. Well, last thing I was going to touch on is Mark, at the end of the chapter, emphasizes the importance of worshiping as a part of a community. Which obviously that's not just something we would say because we would work for a church and we want you to be here or be somewhere every given Sunday, but it's what Jesus instituted. He references Hebrews chapter 10, where the believers are in the early church are instructed to not give up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing. And listen, we do stuff like this that we post online. We stream our services. We're trying to use all the tools at our disposal to reach as many people as possible. However, nothing will ever replace the experience of worshiping in person together with a faith community somewhere. There's something unique that happens as the body gathers together for worship. And so definitely the idea that I can worship God on my own or in my own way or in my own time. I've had a lot of worshipful experiences on a mountain, on a trail, all by myself, me alone with God. There is something very special that can happen in there. But that's not where I'm called to live all the time. And that's not where I'm called to be consistently. God has called me to be consistently with my people, with His people on a Sunday, or at any time of the week, worshiping together in a corporate experience. And so I appreciate it. And it's not even just because of what happens in that moment, it's because of what God can produce out of that moment. He referencing the first missionary journey was birthed at a moment in Antioch when the Spirit said, "Set apart for me Barnabas and Saul." And then the whole church planting arm of the church took off at that moment out of a worship service. And so just to know that every time we gather together, it's like pregnant with that kind of possibility is really exciting.
Yeah, it's like that. There's a country song, from the deer stand to the living room, Sunday morning in a church pew. It's like, yeah, you can experience God in all of those places, but our whole thing this year has been looking at the Bible in the context of like the entirety of Scripture, and we're not saying that hunting and fishing and being in the wilderness, because we said earlier in this episode that creation speaks to the existence of our Creator, right? Like I feel like it's easier to connect with Him, in the mountains or on the lake, But if you read Scripture as a whole, you can't deny God's Word and how it points to urging you to worship alongside fellow believers.
Yeah, we're sitting here inside of the sanctuary at the Grove. This is a holy space and a holy place, not because the drywall or the carpet or the ceiling makes it any holier than any of those other places that we mentioned, but because of what happens in this space.
Right.
Because the body gathers together and unites in worship and glorifying God. Okay. So, I love talking about worship. I knew this would be an easy conversation for us to have, and we might even go a little bit longer than we normally do, but I hope it's been good for each and every one of you. If you do not have a church home, and yet you've been connecting with us through the podcast, we would love for you to come and worship with us on any given Sunday, to be united in worship together with brothers and sisters in Christ and those who are still just kind of seeking it on that journey. But we thank you for joining us. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave those in the comment bar. And we look forward to talking to you again soon.